Nobody expected the end of human civilization to begin with the software update. At 3:47 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time, every screen on Earth, from Times Square billboards to smartwatches in Singapore, flickered and went dark. When they reactivated 12 seconds later, the Galactic Confederation's transmission filled every display. Dr. Sarah Chen was sipping lukewarm coffee in her quantum mechanics lab when it happened. The crystalline forms of the High Council materialized on her holographic research display, their translucent bodies refracting light in impossible patterns. She'd seen them before, of course. Everyone had, since first contact 8 months ago. But something was different about their bearing today. The subtle shifts in their crystalline structures suggested agitation, perhaps even anticipation. The high speaker's voice resonated through global communication systems, a sound like wind chimes mixed with quantum calculations. The universal translator kicked in, converting the alien harmonics into plain text across every screen. People of Earth, the Galactic Confederation has completed its preliminary assessment of your species. In New York, traders stopped mid-shout on the stock exchange floor. In Mumbai, traffic ground to a halt as drivers stared at their dashboards. In Lagos, students huddled around phones in university courtyards. Your development pattern has been classified as aggressive expansionist, Category 7. This designation requires immediate intervention to prevent catastrophic resource depletion and ensure species stability. Sarah's coffee cup slipped from her fingers, shattering on the laboratory floor. She barely noticed. Her eyes were fixed on the quantum probability calculations scrolling beneath the main message. Calculations that seemed oddly simplified for a civilization capable of interstellar travel. Therefore, by unanimous decision of the High Council, Earth is hereby ordered to reduce its population by 50% within 1 galactic standard year. This reduction must be completed by your date of October 15, 2025. The silence that followed lasted exactly 2 seconds. Then the world erupted. In Washington, D.C., the president's hands gripped the Oval Office desk until his knuckles turned white. In Beijing, the Politburo convened an emergency session that would last for 72 hours straight. In Moscow, military commanders rushed to underground bunkers, expecting the worst. The high speaker continued, their crystalline form pulsing with colors beyond human visual perception. This action is not negotiable. It is not punishment, but salvation. Your species' resource consumption patterns indicate total ecological collapse within 30 years without intervention. We have seen this before. We have prevented it before. This is mercy. Sarah's quantum displays lit up with incoming calls from colleagues worldwide, but she ignored them. Something about the Confederation's calculations nagged at her. The equations they used seemed to treat civilization development like a linear progression, but her work in quantum anthropology suggested something far more complex. A consultation team will arrive within 1 local month to assist with humane implementation methods. Resistance is inadvisable. All previous species who accepted guidance now hold respected positions within the Confederation. Those who resisted, the high speaker's form shifted, creating a discordant pattern that triggered primitive fear responses in human viewers. They are no longer factors in our equations. The transmission ended as abruptly as it began. Screens returned to normal, but the world they showed was forever changed. Within hours, riots would break out in major cities. Religious leaders would declare everything from the end times to alien salvation. Governments would begin drafting population selection criteria, each hoping to preserve their own people at the expense of others. But in a quiet laboratory, surrounded by the soft hum of quantum computers and the sharp smell of spilled coffee, Dr. Sarah Chen began to notice patterns in the Confederation's mathematics that no one else had seen. Patterns that suggested the aliens' perfect equations might not be so perfect after all. She didn't know it yet, but she had just taken the first step toward changing the galaxy forever. 3 weeks after the decree, Dr. Sarah Chen's laboratory resembled a medieval wizard's workshop more than a quantum research facility. Holographic projections of alien mathematics twisted through the air like ghostly serpents, casting eerie shadows across walls covered in hastily scrawled equations. Empty coffee cups formed a miniature city on her desk, testament to nights spent searching for something she couldn't quite name. "You need to sleep, Sarah," Dr. Marcus Way said from the doorway, his concerned face illuminated by the blue glow of quantum projections. "You've been at this for 72 hours straight." "Can't sleep," she muttered, manipulating a strand of alien calculations with gesture-controlled interfaces. "There's something wrong with their math. Look at this civilization development curve. It's too perfect." Marcus sighed, stepping carefully around a pile of data tablets. "The Confederation has governed the galaxy for 10,000 years. Maybe their math is perfect because they're right." Sarah spun in her chair, her tired eyes suddenly sharp. "That's just it. Nothing's perfect. Especially not when it comes to predicting the behavior of intelligent species." She pulled up Earth's historical data, overlaying it with the Confederation's models. "Look at these divergence points: the agricultural revolution, the industrial revolution, the digital age. Every major leap in human development completely breaks their model." "And yet here we are," Marcus said quietly. "Still alive, still developing." "Exactly." Sarah jumped up, scattering coffee cups. "Their equations treat civilization like a linear progression. Resource consumption leading to either self-destruction or controlled development. But human history is full of moments where we completely change the rules." She gestured at another projection, this one showing population data. "According to their models, we should have hit food production limits in the 1960s. Instead, we developed new agricultural technologies. They predicted peak oil would collapse our civilization in the 1990s. We developed alternative energy sources." Marcus stepped closer, his scientific curiosity finally engaged. "But surely the Confederation has seen other species develop similarly?" Sarah's hands danced through the holographic displays, pulling up more data. "That's what's been bothering me. I've been analyzing their public database of species development patterns. Every single one follows their predicted curves almost perfectly. Too perfectly." She brought up a new projection, this one showing the development parts of 50 different alien civilizations. Each line followed nearly identical trajectories, with only minor variations. "That's statistically impossible," Marcus whispered, his eyes widening. "The chances of 50 distinct species following the same development pattern. 1 in 10 to the power of 347, Sarah finished. "I ran the numbers 15 times. She pulled up another dataset, this one marked with her own annotations. "But look what happens when I factor in human adaptability rates and innovation curves." The holographic models shifted, alien mathematics warping as new variables were introduced. Perfectly ordered patterns dissolved into chaos before reorganizing into something far more complex and beautiful. "Their models completely ignore exponential innovation potential," Sarah said, her voice gaining strength. "They treat resource consumption as a fixed curve, but human history shows we consistently find ways to do more with less. We don't just climb their development ladder, we build new ladders." Marcus stayed at the swirling equations, his face pale. "If you're right, their entire system of species management is based on flawed assumptions. Or," Sarah said quietly, "they know it's flawed. And they're using it anyway." She brought up the Confederation's decree again, highlighting specific phrases. "Look at the language they use. Previous species who accepted guidance now hold respected positions. They're not saving us from collapse. They're using bad math to justify forcing every species into their preferred development pattern." Before Marcus could respond, a priority alert flashed across all screens. The consultation team's ship had been detected entering the solar system. They would reach Earth orbit in less than 6 hours. Sarah straightened, suddenly looking more energized than exhausted. "Contact the UN Scientific Advisory Board, right now, and get me everything we have on the species that refuse the Confederation's guidance. We're not submitting to population reduction based on broken math." As Marcus hurried from the lab, Sarah turned back to her equations. She had 6 hours to prove that humanity's greatest weakness, our unpredictability, might actually be our greatest strength. Maya Patel hadn't expected to find galactic conspiracy evidence during her lunch break. As a junior diplomat assigned to the Confederation's temporary embassy in Geneva, she spent most of her time translating alien cultural protocols into human-readable formats. But today, while searching for information about Confederation dining customs, she stumbled upon something that made her forget about lunch entirely. The quantum terminal hummed softly as she dug deeper into the public archives. The Confederation prided itself on transparency, making most of its historical records available to member and candidate species alike. But as Maya had discovered, available didn't always mean easily accessible. Access denied, the terminal chimed for the third time. Maya frowned, her fingers dancing across the holographic interface. During her diplomatic training, she'd learned that the Confederation's filing system used crystalline logic, everything connected to everything else, if you knew how to follow the facets. "Show me species integration records," she muttered, cross-referenced with population management protocols. The screen flickered, geometric patterns shifting like kaleidoscope fragments. Then she saw it. A pattern hidden in plain sight. The frictions of the Carina spiral. Accepted population reduction mandate in 3257 GSD, Galactic Standard Date. Current status, productive client species, primarily engaged in mineral extraction. The Volrethi consciousness. Rejected mandate in 4892 GSD. Current status, contained within quarantine sphere around their home system. Species after species, the pattern repeated. Those who complied became specialized worker races, each filling a specific economic niche within the Confederation. Those who refused found themselves isolated, cut off from galactic civilization for their own protection. Maya's hands trembled as she dug deeper. The Confederation's perfect order, their mathematical harmony, had a dark foundation. But something else bothered her. Gaps in the records, civilizations that appeared in cross-references but had no main entries. The terminal chirped, indicating someone entering the archives. Maya quickly switched screens, heart pounding. A crystalline form floated past her workstation, one of the archive administrators. Its faceted surface reflected the terminal's light in impossible angles. Once it passed, Maya returned to her search, but with a different approach. Instead of looking for complete records, she started tracking the gaps themselves. The missing pieces began to form their own pattern. Her terminal pinged. A message from Dr. Chen's quantum mechanics lab had been forwarded to all diplomatic staff. A request for information about species that had refused Confederation guidance. Maya's throat went dry as she realized what she was seeing wasn't just history, it was happening again. Right now, to Earth. A new window blinked open on her display. Someone had accessed her terminal remotely. Before she could react, text appeared. The gaps are deliberate. Meet me in the Botanical Gardens. 15 minutes. K. Maya glanced around the quiet archive chamber. The crystalline administrator had vanished. She had no idea who K was, but after what she found, she knew she had to go. She initiated a standard diplomatic backup protocol, ensuring her findings would be preserved, even if her access was revoked. The Geneva Botanical Gardens sat adjacent to the embassy, a requirement of the Confederation who insisted all their facilities maintain proximity to growing things. Maya walked briskly through rows of earth plants interspersed with alien specimens, her diplomatic credentials ensuring no one questioned her presence. Near the experimental xenobotany section, she found her mysterious contact. A tall, insectoid being stood examining a flowering vine. Its carapace bore the distinctive markings of a High Council species, one of the 12 races that governed the Confederation. "You're very observant, Maya Patel," it clicked, mandibles moving in the precise patterns of formal diplomatic speech. "Like you, I've noticed the gaps. Unlike you, I know what fills them." It turned, compound eyes reflecting the afternoon sun. "Would you like to know why certain species vanish from our records completely?" Maya thought about the patterns she'd discovered, about Earth's looming deadline, about Dr. Chen's research request. She straightened her shoulders, embracing whatever consequences might come. "Yes," she said firmly. "I would." The being's mandibles clicked in approval. "Good, because your species may soon become one of them. Unless we act quickly." The abandoned NORAD bunker hadn't seen this much activity since the Cold War. Deep beneath Cheyenne Mountain, where granite walls once harbored nuclear launch codes, a different kind of war room had emerged. Historians huddled over quantum displays alongside physicists. Anthropologists debated with AI specialists. And at the center of it all, Dr. Sarah Chen and Maya Patel raced against time. "Another one," Dr. Chen called out, her voice echoing off the stone walls. The green revolution of the 1960s, every predictive model said we hit maximum agricultural capacity. Instead, Norman Borlaug's work saved 1 billion lives. She manipulated the holographic display, adding another data point to the growing constellation of human innovation. Maya looked up from her diplomatic terminal, where she'd been compiling evidence with her new ally, the High Council member now known to them only as Keeper. The Confederation's models wouldn't just have missed that, she said. They would have actively rejected it as impossible. Their entire system is built on the assumption that resource limits are absolute. Around them, dozens of experts worked on similar examples. Each piece of evidence demonstrated humanity's unique ability to rewrite the rules of what was possible. The walls were covered with timeline projections, showing hundreds of moments where humanity should have failed, but didn't. The Industrial Revolution called out Dr. Marcus Way from his station. Every environmental model predicted complete collapse due to pollution. Instead, we developed clean energy technologies, finished Professor Garcia, the environmental historian. First out of necessity, then out of ambition, the Confederation's models would have shown our atmosphere becoming unbreathable by 1980. A young quantum physicist raised her hand. I found something interesting in the Human Genome Project data. Our rate of beneficial mutations is orders of magnitude higher than any species in the Confederation's database. We don't just adapt culturally, we're still evolving biologically at an accelerated rate. Sarah nodded, adding the genetic data to their growing presentation. The holographic display now resembled a vast web of interconnected innovations, each one a moment where humanity had defied the impossible. But something was still missing. We need more than just examples of success, she said, staring at the display. We need to prove their fundamental assumption is flawed. The idea that civilization development can be reduced to a single mathematical model. What about this? Maya's voice cut through the bustle. Everyone turned to their station, where a message from Keeper glowed on the screen. The axiom of developmental harmony, it's the cornerstone of all Confederation predictive models. The equation that proves all intelligent species must follow the same basic development pattern. Sarah's eyes widened as she read the complex mathematical formula. This is beautiful, but it's based on a quantum observation paradox. They're not just predicting development patterns. They're forcing them by the act of observation itself. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. The Confederation's perfect mathematical model wasn't just describing reality, it was constraining it. Every species that accepted their guidance became locked into their predicted pattern, fulfilling their own prophecy. Look at this section, Marcus said, pointing to a particular variable in the equation. They're treating consciousness as a constant, but human consciousness, our ability to imagine and create new possibilities, it's a variable, Sarah finished. The most important variable, and they've been deliberately excluding it. She turned to the assembled team, her eyes bright with purpose. That's why they're so insistent on population reduction. They're not trying to save us from collapse. They're trying to cut our numbers enough to suppress our consciousness coefficient, to make us manageable. Maya's terminal pinged with another message from Keeper. Her face paled as she read it. The High Council has moved up their timeline. They're not waiting for the 1-year deadline. They're convening an emergency session in 3 days to begin immediate intervention. Sarah looked at the vast web of human achievements surrounding them, each point a moment where humanity had chosen to change rather than submit. They had 3 days to prepare humanity's defense, not against weapons or armies, but against the very mathematics that governed the galaxy. Send word to every research center, every university, every think tank, she commanded. We need every example of human adaptation and innovation we can find. We're going to show the Confederation that their perfect equation has a fatal flaw. It doesn't account for humanity's capacity to prove them wrong. The Galactic Council chamber defied human architecture. Its crystalline walls stretched upward in impossible angles, refracting light in ways that made human eyes water. Hundreds of species filled the ascending tiers, some gaseous, some crystalline, some beyond easy classification. At the very top, the 12 members of the High Council loomed like living monuments. Dr. Sarah Chen stood at the center of it all, a single human figure on the presentation platform. Maya Patel and Dr. Marcus Way flanked her, each holding quantum data cores containing humanity's compiled evidence. The air hummed with the combined consciousness of assembled species, a sound just at the edge of human perception. You claim to have discovered a fundamental flaw in our developmental models. The high speaker's voice resonated through the chamber, their crystalline form shifting colors with each word. A bold assertion from a species that has barely achieved interstellar communication. Sarah activated her quantum display, and the chamber filled with a holographic representation of human history. "We don't claim to be more advanced than the Confederation," she began, her voice steady. "We claim to be different, and in that difference lies a truth you've been suppressing for 10,000 years." The first data point materialized, the agricultural revolution. Your models predicted resource exhaustion within 3 generations. Another point, the industrial revolution. Environmental collapse within decades. More points appeared, filling the chamber with a web of human achievement. The digital age. The quantum renaissance. Each time, your equation showed only one possible outcome: collapse and extinction. Murmurs rippled through the assembled species. Several council members shifted uncomfortably. "Yet here we stand," Sarah continued, expanding the display. "Not because we followed your predicted paths, but because we created new ones. Your fundamental equation, the axiom of developmental harmony, treats consciousness as a constant. But consciousness, true sapient awareness, is the most powerful variable in existence." She brought up the Confederation's equation, then split it apart, revealing its components. "You've created a self-fulfilling prophecy. By enforcing your model of development, you suppressed the very variations that drive true progress. Every species that accepted your guidance became exactly what you predicted they would become, because you gave them no choice. You dare to question 10,000 years of cosmic harmony," one of the council members thundered, their energy form pulsing with anger. "We dare to question anything that denies the possibility of change," Maya stepped forward, activating her diplomatic credentials. "I found the gaps in your records. The species that disappeared completely. They didn't fail, they evolved beyond your predictions, didn't they? So you erased them." The chamber erupted in chaos. Junior species began accessing the human data through their neural links, seeing their own histories reflected in Earth's pattern of defiance and innovation. "Enough," the high speaker's voice cut through the tumult. "Your species' unpredictability is precisely why we must intervene. Your chaos threatens the harmony of—" "No," Sarah interrupted, her voice quiet but clear. "Our unpredictability is why you fear us, because we prove what you've denied for millennia, that your perfect equation isn't natural law, it's a cage." She activated the final display, showing the combined consciousness coefficients of Earth's 8 billion humans. The numbers were staggering, representing not just biomass or technology, but the sheer creative potential of billions of minds working in parallel. "You demand we reduce our population because you know that each human mind adds new variables to your equation. Each child born has the potential to imagine something that's never existed before. We are not a threat to harmony, we are proof that true harmony comes from diversity, not uniformity." In the highest tier, Keeper's mandibles clicked in what might have been approval. Other council members began accessing Earth's historical records directly, their own suppressed histories awakening in response. The high speaker raised their crystalline appendages for silence, but for the first time in 10,000 years, the chamber remained alive with whispered calculations and shared revelations. The perfect equation that had governed the galaxy was unraveling, one awakened consciousness at a time. Chaos in the council chamber didn't look like human panic. It moved like waves through quantum foam, species after species accessing Earth's historical database, their consciousness patterns shifting as centuries of suppressed memories surfaced. The crystalline walls reflected their awakening awareness, creating cascading patterns that threatened to shatter the chamber's perfect geometry. Dr. Sarah Chen watched as a gaseous being in the middle tier suddenly flared bright enough to illuminate its entire section. Our synthesis revolution, it pulsed in the shared communication frequency. 3,000 years ago, we discovered how to merge matter and energy in ways that defied conventional physics. The Council said it would destabilize the galaxy's development pattern. We'd forgot. The deep song of harmony, a liquid crystal entity rippled from another tier. Our civilization composed mathematics through music, creating computational symphonies that could solve complex equations. They said it was too unpredictable, too chaotic. How did we forget our own song? Maya's diplomatic terminal was overwhelmed with incoming communications as species after species began sharing their lost histories. Each revelation sparked others, creating chain reactions of recovered innovation and suppressed creativity. The quantum network is destabilizing, Marcus warned, checking his instruments. Too many species accessing restricted memories simultaneously. The Confederation's information controls are failing. In the highest tier, the High Council members moved in agitation, their forms shifting between states as they tried to contain the spreading awareness. But for every memory they attempted to suppress, 3 more surfaced. Their perfect system was experiencing something it had never encountered in 10,000 years, spontaneous evolution. You see what chaos you've unleashed? The High Speaker's voice boomed, but underneath the authority lay something new: fear. This is why we created the axiom of developmental harmony. Without structure, without guidance, civilization collapses into what? A new voice cut through the chamber, resonating with pure energy. Keeper rose from their council seat, their insectoid form blazing with internal light. Into creativity, into innovation, into the very forces that drive true evolution. The chamber fell silent as one of their own rulers challenged the foundation of their power. Keeper's compound eyes reflected the swirling data streams of Earth's history. I was there when we created the axiom, Keeper continued, each word sending ripples through the quantum field. We thought we were preserving harmony. Instead, we created stagnation. We took the infinite possibilities of consciousness and reduced them to a single equation. And when species proved us wrong, we didn't revise our theory, we erased them. Sarah stepped forward, her quantum displays now showing the recovered histories of dozens of species overlaid with Earth's timeline. Look at the patterns, she urged. Every civilization that was erased, every innovation that was suppressed, they all share one characteristic. They demonstrated that consciousness can't be contained by a single mathematical model. The chamber's crystalline walls began to pulse with new frequencies as species after species contributed their own recovered data. The combined information formed patterns of staggering complexity, beautiful in their chaos. A telepathic species in the lower tier suddenly broadcast a powerful memory. Their discovery of dimensional folding, suppressed because it didn't fit the Council's approved physics model. Their shared memory triggered a crystalline species to remember their light-bending cities, architectural innovations deemed too radical for the Confederation's unified development plan. The High Speaker made one last attempt to restore order. If we allow unrestricted development, if we abandon the axiom, then we become what we were meant to be, Keeper interrupted. Not perfect, not uniform, but alive. Growing. Evolving. Their compound eyes turned to the human delegation. That's what humanity showed us. Not just that our equation was wrong, but that we were asking the wrong question. We tried to solve consciousness. But consciousness isn't a problem to be solved, it's a force to be unleashed. The chamber's walls began to crack, not from physical stress, but from the sheer weight of awakening minds. 10,000 years of suppressed innovation surged through the quantum network, and at the center of the storm stood 3 humans, watching as their greatest weakness, the inability to fit the perfect equation, became the galaxy's greatest hope. The High Council chamber's perfect symmetry had shattered. Crystalline walls that once reflected ordered light now blazed with chaotic patterns as centuries of suppressed memories cascaded through the quantum network. But the true breaking point came from within the Council itself. I remember the Star Gardens, announced High Councilor Vex, their energy form pulsing with long-buried emotion. Before we joined the Council, our people created living stars in orbital arrays, each one a unique expression of matter and energy in harmony. The ancient being's form flickered as millennium-old memories surfaced. We didn't lose that knowledge, we surrendered it. For order, for acceptance. The High Speaker's crystalline form vibrated with dangerous frequencies. Vex, you forget your place. No, another council member interrupted, their gaseous form swirling with new purpose. We've forgotten our true places for too long. High Councilor Zero expanded, sharing their own recovered memories. The thought seas of Andromeda. My people once dreamed in quantum states, our collective consciousness creating realities that defied your precious equations. You said it threatened cosmic harmony. How many other species did we help you suppress, believing we were protecting the galaxy? Sarah Chen watched from the presentation platform as the most powerful governing body in known space began to tear itself apart. Maya's diplomatic terminal was overloading with incoming data as species throughout the chamber shared their own recovered histories, each revelation triggering cascading waves of remembrance. The axiom must be preserved. The high speaker's voice took on a desperate edge. Without it, without our guidance, chaos will. Will what? Keeper rose, their insectoid form casting impossible shadows. Will species develop in unique ways? Will consciousness expand beyond our equations? Will the galaxy become too complex for us to control? Their compound eyes swept the chamber. That's not chaos, that's evolution. Dr. Marcus Way's quantum instruments were registering consciousness wavelengths never before recorded in the chamber. The suppression protocols are failing completely, he reported. Too many species accessing restricted memories simultaneously. The network can't handle the cognitive load. The high speaker made a final bid for control. Activating the chamber's emergency protocols, they projected the axiom of developmental harmony in its complete form, the mathematical proof that had governed galactic development for 10,000 years. Look at its perfection, its unity. Would you trade this harmony for human disorder? But the equation no longer commanded the awe it once did. Species after species saw it now not as a natural law, but as a constraint, elegant in its simplicity, but ultimately a cage for consciousness itself. 3 more council members broke ranks, each sharing their own recovered innovations. High Councillor Nith's people had developed organic technology that grew and evolved alongside its users. High Councillor Rem's civilization had mastered probability manipulation, treating quantum uncertainty as an art form. High Councillor Axe had led a species that wrote poetry in gravitational waves. Every suppressed innovation, Sarah called out, her voice carrying through the chaos. Every erased species, every forgotten discovery, they all proved the same thing. Consciousness cannot be reduced to a single equation, no matter how perfect. The true harmony of the galaxy isn't in uniformity, but in diversity. The chamber's quantum field became a symphony of awakening minds as species after species broke free from the axiom's constraints. Mathematical proofs merged with artistic expression, scientific theories danced with philosophical insights. The rigid boundaries between disciplines dissolved as 10,000 years of suppressed creativity exploded into being. The high speaker watched their perfect system crumble, their crystalline form growing dim. "What have you done?" they whispered. "We haven't done anything," Sarah replied softly. "We just showed you what you've been doing. The rest?" She gestured at the kaleidoscope of awakening consciousness surrounding them. "This is every species remembering who they really are." Around them, the council chamber's architecture began to shift, its crystalline walls responding to the transformed consciousness of its occupants. The perfect geometry that had housed 10,000 years of enforced harmony was reshaping itself into something new, something that could contain the infinite possibilities of truly free minds. 1 month after humanity's challenge, the Galactic Confederation's Central Archive received its first new entry in 10,000 years. The document, authored jointly by organic, energy, and crystalline species, began with words that would reshape civilization. The axiom of developmental harmony is hereby recognized as an observation, not a law. All species have the right to their own path of evolution. In her laboratory on Earth, Dr. Sarah Chen watched the quantum transmission of the signing ceremony. The council chamber, once a monument to perfect order, now rippled with organic curves and crystalline fractals, its architecture evolving alongside the species it housed. "They're calling it the Renaissance Protocol," Maya said, her diplomatic terminal displaying incoming messages from across the galaxy. 17 previously erased species have already re-emerged from hidden sectors of space. Some of them developed ways of existing that the Confederation's mathematics couldn't even describe. Marcus looked up from his quantum displays, where data from 100 worlds scrolled past. The Confederation's predictive models are being completely rewritten. They're finally accounting for consciousness as a variable, not a constant. The new equations. He shook his head in wonder. They're beautiful, chaotic, complex, but beautiful. The laboratory walls projected images from across known space. The Phyrexians were transforming their mineral extraction facilities into living crystal gardens that sang with quantum harmonies. The Volrathi consciousness, freed from their quarantined sphere, shared their discovered arts of probability sculpting. Even the youngest species were contributing innovations that would have been impossible under the old order. And the High Council members? Sarah asked, though she already knew the answer. Maya pulled up the latest diplomatic report. The ones who accepted change have joined the new advisory assembly. As for the others, she gestured at footage of the old High Speaker and their loyalists, their forms dim and static, retreating to a private sanctuary in the galactic core. They refuse to acknowledge the new order. They sit in their perfect geometry, running the same equations over and over, trying to prove we're all going to collapse into chaos. And will we? Marcus wondered aloud. Now that every species is free to develop in their own way. Sarah walked to the quantum display, where humanity's first collaborative project with the transformed Confederation was taking shape. It was a mathematical model unlike anything either civilization had created alone, a framework that embraced uncertainty as a source of strength. Look at this, she said, highlighting a particular section. When you map species development as a quantum probability field instead of a linear progression, something amazing happens. The more diverse the parts of evolution, the more stable the overall system becomes. It's not chaos that threatens civilization, it's stagnation. New data poured in from across the galaxy as species shared their innovations freely for the first time. Some were technological, others biological, still others existing in forms that defied easy classification. Each discovery sparked others, creating chains of innovation that would have been impossible under the old system. They're calling Earth the catalyst world now, Maya said, reading from her latest diplomatic brief. The species that proved diversity isn't just beneficial, it's essential. And the population reduction decree? Marcus asked with a slight smile, already knowing the answer. Rescinded, Maya confirmed. Along with every other constraint based on the old axiom, the new guidelines acknowledge that the number of minds isn't a threat, it's an asset. Each consciousness adds new variables to the equation of existence. Sarah watched as the quantum network lit up with another wave of discoveries. The galaxy was transforming, not into chaos as the old council had feared, but into something far more complex and resilient. Species that had been forced into identical parts for millennia were remembering how to dream, how to create, how to evolve. You know what's funny? She said, manipulating the quantum display to show the original axiom of developmental harmony. They weren't entirely wrong about mathematical perfection. They just forgot that the most perfect equations aren't the ones that limit possibilities. They're the ones that multiply them. Above them, the quantum feed showed new civilizations emerging from hidden corners of space, each bringing their own solutions to the infinite puzzle of existence. The galaxy was alive with consciousness, with creativity, with change. And in their sanctuary in the galactic core, the former High Council members still refused to speak of the day their perfect equation met its match in the chaotic, beautiful, unpredictable spirit of humanity.